Recently, I was watching this video by Kaiju Canuck, and he was having a discussion about the types of problems in the Godzilla community right now. And that conversation really stuck with me. And the two things that really stuck out to me were two topics: LGBTQ discrimination and being a youth in the fandom. I want to know more about these topics, so I reached out to Donny and Demon 1954. I personally have not experienced this type of stuff yet, but I think it's important to get this out to as many people as possible. I also really do think that this is going to be a really good learning experience for me. For those who don't know who you are, can you explain who you are a little bit and how you fit into the Godzilla community?
Yes, thank you. My name is Donny Winter. I'm the host of Growing Up with Godzilla, which is a show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've grown with the character and franchise over time. And before that, I've been pretty active as a Godzilla YouTuber. And then even way before that, I used to be an avid fan fiction writer. Way back when, I used to write a lot of it. Whether it was good or not, that's always up for debate, but it was fun. So now, fast forward, here we are. I do all sorts of Godzilla things everywhere.
We're obviously here to talk about LGBTQ discrimination. When was your first encounter with these discrimination conversations, and why was it coming up?
So I would say my first encounter was when strictly within the Godzilla fandom specifically. The first time I encountered it was when I was a teenager. So this is going to date me horribly, but I was a teenager back in the early to mid 2000s, and at that time I was kind of becoming new to the internet world. I was joining various Godzilla forums and websites. And at that time, the internet was kind of the only place where I could be myself. So on these various sites, I would often be upfront about, during conversations about my identity, etc., because people were always asking those types of questions. And unfortunately, it led to a number of reactions from people. Either people were, one, very supportive, two, harassing and bullying based on being LGBTQ+, or three, I would sometimes have people exhibit some very creepy behavior because they would become fascinated they would kind of exoticize meeting somebody in the community, right? Yeah. So I would say that was my first encounter on those old message boards, because back then there really wasn't a lot of conversations about bullying and why bullying is an issue. So I would just navigate day to day, having people harass me for being gay or associating my love with Mothra for being gay. They would often conflate the two, which became very frustrating when I was on the internet back then.
Thank you. And I'm really sorry that you had to deal with that.
Thank you. I mean, I learned to survive through it. I found a close-knit group of people who ended up kind of supporting me and befriending me. So it took time to navigate through it, but I am glad that I did. And I thank those people who were lifelines for me at that time.
Has that kind of changed the way you engage with the fandom or media in general?
So that's an interesting question. I think when I was younger, it made me anticipate that everyone was always, waiting to just go on the offensive with me. So I would say probably when I was at the end of high school, entering college, I was just always eager to argue with people. And not that I still don't like arguing from time to time, but I would always just assume that everyone had negative intentions. And that it didn't change the way I consumed the media necessarily, because I still consumed the media and enjoyed it, but it did kind of shape how I maybe avoided certain spaces or knew particular people of which to avoid. I ended up creating at that time my own website called Kaiju Galaxy because I wanted to create like my own little space where people could be, of diverse identities, enjoying, fan fiction, art, all sorts of different things. So doing that, I think surrounding myself with friends helped, but also creating my own space where I could be myself helped a lot as well. And that's kind of how I learned to regulate the way I would engage with people. And I stopped assuming that everyone was just waiting to go on the offensive, right?
Yeah. How has this personally affected you? I know you were talking about how you like kind of just like with like you just like don't engage.
Mm-hmm. I guess so. It depends on what era of my life you're talking about. So, like at that time, like I was obviously very eager to argue with people. Sometimes I was petty, and it's not that I feel like all humans can be petty, right?
Yeah.
I still have a capacity to be petty, but obviously, going from high school to now, I'm in my mid 30s at this point. Obviously, I am much more able to regulate my reactions and responses to things, and I can, in a way, turn one of those moments into an educational conversation. That's kind of where I am at this point in my life. I really want to have educational conversations, especially within the fandom, because I think that a lot of people who throw out hate and discrimination, they do it either out of sheer ignorance because they simply don't know, or they do it because they feel threatened or they are projecting some sort of insecurity, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of how it's affected me, I feel like it's allowed me to better navigate people and to kind of get to the root of why someone may be exhibiting hateful behavior. It's gotten to the point where I can maybe, like, if somebody calls me like the derogatory F slur, like I'm not going to like crumble like I did in 2004, as opposed to now where I'll be like, oh, you chose to say that to me on the public internet. That's an interesting choice. Like, where does that come from? Like, I literally will ask people, you're being hateful. Let's back it up a little bit and determine where it's coming from. Like, why did you feel the need to say that to me? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And that kind of stops people in their tracks. Like, they will have the tendency of like halting themselves and kind of reassessing what they said.
My next question was kind of a bit like that: is were these private conversations or were they out there? You talked a little bit about them being out there.
So I would say, I mean, back in 2003, 2004, when I was new to like the internet fandom life, most of those conversations were in personal messaging, because like a lot of forums would have like almost not quite an instant messenger, but they would have like a private messaging tool that you could use. So like a lot of that bullying happened via those tools. Some of them happened on like posts made on forum, like websites, but like some of those forums just don't even exist anymore because it's been 20 years. Since then, on social media, like the comments have been a little bit more public, and I recently, probably a couple months ago, did a video where I showed receipts, because I used to be the type of person where I felt that showing receipts was emboldening the hateful behavior too much. But now I'm also at this point where people need to see examples and people need to realize that it is there, because there are many people who deny that hateful behavior exists in spaces like the Godzilla fandom.
When you had these conversations, did people stand with you and like kind of like tell the other person to like back off? That's not okay.
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So you're kind of like talking about the bystander effect, right? What does the bystander do in a type of situation like that? Back then, like during like the early to mid 2000s, people very rarely stood up for me. I mean, a few close friends would. Fast forward to now, I would say that people are far more active in calling out problematic behavior when they see it. So if they see someone, throwing a derogatory slur at me, like they are more apt to call it out. Or for other examples, like what if somebody goes to like a convention and sees somebody being creepy towards someone else, people are more apt now to call out that type of behavior as well. So I think that there's always room for more people to kind of engage and be more active in that. I understand that not everybody is necessarily capable of doing it, nor are they in that right headspace to do it. So I always kind of exercise a little bit of grace when it comes to bystanders sometimes. But I really think the big thing has to do with people with platforms. Like, I think people with big platforms, when they see that type of behavior, it's important for them to do the best they can to use their platform as a tool to call out problematic behavior. Mind you, nobody's perfect. Even I've not been perfect in always using my platform to call out every single thing that may happen. But I think that it's important that people just do the best they can.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm trying to make a platform for you, kind of build a platform to get this out here while we're talking about today.
No, thank you. Well, and see, like gestures like this, Talon, like where you are carving out time to at least have a discussion, right? And I think that's what really intimidates a lot of people, though, too. Like many of them, they know a conversation needs to happen, but they may not know the right steps to take to have the conversation. And I'm not saying it's not difficult. It is absolutely difficult, because if something has never happened to you as the speaker, like some people may not want to have that conversation because they may not have the knowledge, or they may just not have that shared experience that informs them to have a dialogue, right? But I think that it is always just important to try whenever possible.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Why do you think this happens, especially in this type of community? Like in the Godzilla community?
I think it could be a number of things, truthfully. I think probably... I think the biggest reason would be a lot of people with privilege enter these fandom spaces as a means of escape. And sometimes they may be escaping reality, but sometimes in their privilege, they are also escaping the truth that we live in a world of 8 billion people, and that diversity is reflected in the Godzilla fandom as well. And sometimes when they are confronted with people with different experiences, that causes a fear because they don't know how to respond to those experiences, right? That's one reason why I developed Growing Up with Godzilla as a show, because like I think it's important for people to see that all of us as Godzilla fans have different backgrounds and histories, different identities, and when we fell in love with Godzilla, we all probably fell in love with the character for similar reasons, but there may be some unique reasons, unique to ourselves or our communities that matter, right? But a lot of people, because of the current, space that we're in, like in a world where a lot of hate is glorified on a national and even international level, people see that and they use it and adapt it as a learned experience that, they too can be hateful toward others. So it's a combination of that fear, but also a combination of seeing that hate and thinking that it's acceptable to be hateful because they see representation of that hate everywhere. Did I answer that whole question? Could you repeat it one more time for me so I can make sure I got all of it?
Yeah. Why do you think this happens, especially in this community?
So another reason I think it happens is simply because people don't have the knowledge or exposure to diverse communities, right? When you have more exposure to diverse people, you broaden your understanding of the world around you, right? I mentioned privilege earlier. Like, I myself have a lot of privilege. I grew up in rural northern Michigan. I had very minimal exposure to diverse populations until I went into college. And during that time, like, I was trying to make sense of, like, wow, this world is way bigger than my small little, narrow, corn-fed, woods-living kid that I was, right? So I think it's a variety of different things. And I think a big reason people don't want to look at that type of thing is because there is a shame associated with it too. A lot of people feel ashamed to not acknowledge their privilege, or they feel ashamed to not have the knowledge. And I'm just going to be blunt and say it's okay to feel that way, but it's what you do with that shame that really matters. Are you going to weaponize that shame against people? Or are you going to use that shame as a means to like, oh, I don't know this about this group of people, or I may not have ever met this individual. Like, what can I do to work through that shame and understand that I live in a huge world, right? And in I exist in a fandom that has a large, diverse population.
Yeah. Personally, I haven't experienced this type of hate because I don't talk about personal stuff on my channel. I'm a smaller creator, so really haven't had the need to go out there and say oh, this happened, guys. If I would have a bigger platform, then maybe I would.
Yeah,
I've also
absolutely.
learned to not get personal, that personal on the internet.
Well, when you think about it, though, the step you're taking here by carving out this space is a step in that direction, right? Yeah. Where you are, allowing that opportunity to take place. Now, mind you, I don't think that everyone needs to have that conversation to the same degree that I will have that conversation, right? Because my platform is 15 years old at this point, so people on my platform are used to it. But if it's something that you build up to, I think there's always a way for people to integrate it into their content in a meaningful, enriching way, right?
Yeah. I've obviously, not to make a pun, grown up with Godzilla. If you go back on my channel, I've been a lifelong Godzilla fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I've grown up with the character, and I don't know if it's good if I haven't experience this type of stuff, because I was rewatching your talk with Kyle and Rick and D-Man.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed. I haven't experienced that stuff, especially being young in the fandom.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that you haven't experienced that. So to me, that suggests that you are probably in good spaces that are uplifting and encouraging, and that you've found a good cohort of people who can be supportive and uplifting, right? So I'm glad that you've not had to deal with that level of ridiculousness, because that's really what it is. It's ridiculousness, right?
Yeah. Do you find this is a primarily US problem, or is it people from all over the world you're receiving this from?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know the exact demographics, but I do know that fans in the United States have been more vocal about such things and a little bit more discriminatory, let's just say. And I think it's simply kind of going back to what I said earlier. It's because we here in this space have that representation we see every day in the media of individuals and groups of people with agendas and motivations just outright being hateful on a very large scale public stage, right? Yeah. So because of that exposure, I think a lot of people see that, and then they're emboldened to behave the same way, in a way almost like they're gaining permission to do so, right?
Yeah.
And it's sad to me, because if you watch my content, over the years, my Godzilla content specifically, in no way have I really imposed who I am on people, because that's always the assumption. A lot of people who are uncomfortable with the fact that there are LGBTQ plus people in the fandom, or women in the fandom, or Black, Indigenous people of color in the fandom, they jump to this conclusion of oh, well, you shouldn't draw attention to who you are necessarily. And many of them make the comment simply by us just existing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. We are saying, though, that we are here and that sometimes our backgrounds and histories inform why we love the character, what the character's done for us, how the movies served as an escape for us. And aren't those aspects worth talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was
Yeah.
really nice. What can people do to combat it and be an ally?
Ooh, that's a good question. So there are a few different ways. First and foremost, when it comes to taking an active role and being an ally for people, I always tell them to take whatever action they can after considering their own mental health and their own bandwidth, right? Because it is a lot of work to do, right? When you see something take place in a space where you see discrimination happening, it takes a lot of strength to be able to be that person to put the foot down and be like, hey, this is not acceptable. Why was that said, right? And so exercise that first. And then the next thing that you can do is, of course, call out the behavior, call it out diplomatically, tactfully. I think what I said earlier in this conversation, where I kind of ask people to restate what they said, or I try to help reframe their problematic comments in the form of a question, that really helps people realize that, like, oh crap, I said that. Like, oh my goodness, I said that. And that usually helps. Sometimes it is necessary to kind of have to, like, eviscerate somebody every now and then, like call them out, and be more firm with your language. At that point, though, sometimes you just have to delete or block somebody. I always tell people, if you have a platform, if somebody is being horrible, or you see someone being horrible to someone else and they aren't listening to you, delete or block them, right? The internet is beautiful and that it empowers us to do that, right? So I would say those three things. And the next thing would be, if you want to be an ally, if you have a platform, in whatever way you can, show that the space you've created in that platform is a safe space for those people. It could be something as simple as sharing your pronouns, right? Like whenever I do an episode for anything, or if I do a guest appearance, I try to share my pronouns. I mean, that could be a pretty huge gesture to those, especially in the trans and non-binary communities, right? Showing that, I am a safe person to go to when it comes to being upfront and sharing those things. I think that just showing people that you are willing to go to bat for them, that is such a huge gesture. And even if it's something subtle, that is very significant, and people see that all the time.
Yeah. I am an ally too, as well.
Thank you.
I have friends that are trans and LGBTQ, or that's
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm glad they have you.
Yeah, and I support them 100%. And I've never really said that before, so.
Well, I am really proud of you for saying that. Like, that in and of itself is an amazing act of allyship, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, here is a common rhetoric you hear. A lot of people will say, well, oh, we're being woke, right? And whenever somebody says that, I always ask them, like, well, what do you mean by woke, right? Like, what does that mean to you? If they give me their definition, and it tends to be like one of those hateful talking points, I'll be like, well, where do you think that definition comes from, right? Kind of like guide them down a little wormhole of like, oh, where does that hate originate from? But declaring that you support people and that we're empathetic of people, like, if that's woke, then wouldn't that be a good thing, right? Just simply caring.
To be honest, I'm like confused on what the word woke means. I am like 17 and I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Right. Well, so a lot of people do get confused by it. So I would say, there's a few different definitions of woke, but woke, I would say, is just demonstrating a sense of social awareness, right? being able to socially read a room, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, being mindful that there are people around you who may be going through something different based on their history, their identity, their backgrounds, etc. Right?
What advice would you give to someone who's facing discrimination in the community right now?
My advice for those facing any discrimination in the Godzilla fandom right now would be to be mindful of the people you surround yourself with, right? Because when I was younger, I so desperately wanted to feel a sense of belonging. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to fit in. And I would often compromise myself. I would alter myself to make other people happy to the extent where it was sabotaging me of who I am, right? So it made me sad, and it made me feel not happy being in the Godzilla fandom. But once I started realizing, like, I don't need those people in my life, I there are people out there who I can surround myself with who are uplifting. That's when I made that connection. That's when I realized that, hey, I have more power over who I surround myself with and the spaces I inhabit on the internet more than I realized. So once I started doing that, I felt a lot better. So my big piece of advice would be to be mindful of those who you surround yourself with, and to be mindful of the spaces that you occupy. Now, second piece of advice is a reminder. This is something my therapist always tells me. Donny, you deserve to exist in the spaces that you inhabit, because a lot of people who are hateful, who like to bully or harass you, will try to convince you and make you feel like you don't belong in that space, or that you're not worthy of that space, okay? Oftentimes, like I've mentioned, that is typically a projection of their own insecurity, and it's not a reflection of who you are as a person, right?
Yeah.
So completely, like, reframe when you see that type of behavior from people. Remind yourself that you do belong here, okay, and that this space is just as much for you as it is for anyone else, right? And last but not least, enjoy the content, right? Sometimes it can be very difficult to enjoy the content when you have people behaving that way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, remember, you have your own story and your own background when it comes to being a Godzilla fan. And nobody, no matter what they might say or what they might do, can take that away from you. And that's what matters most.
Thank you so much, Donny.
Yeah, thank you.
I will leave links to all of your socials in the description of the video. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and keep up the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, man. Now I want to learn more about D-Man's experience being a youth in the fandom. I would also like to share my experience as well, and also just have a fun conversation with him. Thank you so much for joining us, D-Man. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into everything?
Sure. I'm Derek, or D-Man, as many people know me. I started out doing Godzilla YouTube back 10 years ago now. I started in 2014 after obviously being inspired by the Godzilla 2014 movie. But that's because I've been a lifelong Godzilla fan. And I've also been making YouTube videos since, like, I think 2012 or before. But on a different channel. And at some point, I got really into watching these YouTubers called the Sons of Serizawa. And I was so into their content, and I wanted to basically, the goal was I wanted to make a YouTube channel so I could get invited on their podcast. And so I was like, well, I can't upload Godzilla content on the same channel I upload gaming videos on. So I made a second Godzilla channel. And then that wound up being like the number one most defining decision of my life. Because from that point on, since middle school, I've been making Godzilla videos, and as I grew in popularity, it became a bigger and bigger part of my life, taking up more time. As my channel kind of grew and became my job, and from there, it's like all of the decisions I made, all the opportunities I've had, have basically come directly from YouTube. And at some point late in high school, I shifted focus from I was going to go into college for journalism, and I wound up going for film and television instead, production for film and television. And so that was all directly because of the YouTube channel. And then from there, I graduated college, and now I work in the film industry. At the moment, I work as an art assistant, and then trying to work my way to director at some point. But yeah, it's all interweaved with YouTube and with Godzilla, and yeah, it's been quite the adventure over the past 10 years.
Thank you so much. And I want to say, I actually grew up watching you.
That is so weird to hear. Whenever people are like, I grew up watching you, it's so weird because I still I'm friends with a bunch of people that I grew up watching in the Godzilla community, and they look at me like I'm one of the new guys, So I'll talk to my friends who have been doing Godzilla videos since 2010 or 11 or whatever, and for them, I'm still kind of one of the new guys. And then so to talk to people who are like, I grew up watching you, it's it blows my mind every time. And it's so trippy for me to think the Sons of Sarazawa, when they did their podcast, are younger than I am now. And it's just so weird to look back on and to see how much time has changed. But I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I found you through after 2015, 2016, when I was still an itty bitty kid. So
you were right on the ground floor.
I know. And then I also you and Louis Duran, do you know who that is?
Yes, yeah.
You guys were the first people that I grew up with to start getting into Godzilla. So without you, this room wouldn't be here. My channel wouldn't exist if it weren't for you and Louis Duran.
Well, there you go, man. See, it's and you have no idea. You're going to be talking to somebody in some amount of time who's going to be saying the same thing to you. It is so weird the way it passes down. It's so cool. I feel like there's maybe one or two-ish generations of Godzilla YouTubers before Louis and I. We really were kind of the second main wave of Godzilla YouTubers post 2014. I don't know if there's been a lot until recently. I feel like in the past 3 or 4 years, there's been all these other channels that have started to pop up, and some of them have been around for a while, but they're all gaining traction now. Goji Guy, I think, has been around, but has really gotten popular now, and it's so cool to see the different generations of Godzilla YouTuber. And I'm telling you, at some point, someone's gonna say the same thing to you. It's gonna be wild.
I hope so. And the funny thing is, I am also wanting to get into film and TV production as well.
I think it's a YouTuber thing. I think if you're someone who does YouTube videos, you either do it for one of two reasons, because you want to get money and fame or whatever, or because you're passionate about it. And I feel generally the people who want money, they'll either be perfectly content with YouTube and they'll never want to do anything else but the YouTube thing or social media or whatever, or they just will quit. But the people who really enjoy it, I feel the overlap of people who do YouTube and people who are interested in film is an enormous overlap, because it's us making films at home, So yeah. I think I'm learning that's a very common if you're a YouTuber, that you also are probably wanting to be a filmmaker.
I guess we could just kind of talk about our experiences being in the fandom. I feel like you have more of the other side, because I don't interact that much, to be honest, into communities anymore. So
why so?
I'm just scared to get my opinion out there sometimes.
But why is that? Because I feel that touches on a lot of my experience in the fan base.
I also just want to learn more, to be honest, about why people interact as well. But from my experience, I haven't really had the will to get into the connect with the fandom. I haven't really experienced much as a YouTuber. I'm okay, I'll post this. Nothing happens. Post this. Okay. And then I think last September, I posted my review on the Super 7 -1 Godzilla, and that gained me some traction. And so I'm this is cool. So maybe and then I think around there I joined Kaiju Canuck's Discord server, or the Kaiju Hug Box.
Nice.
I'm also terrible with group chats. With more than like 4 people, I can't do them.
I'm not. Yeah, I struggle with that stuff too. Like I struggle with like even just responding to like texting one person at a time. Like I've never been huge about that, which is funny because I really try to be engaged with my comment sections, but um I guess that feels a little different because it's like every video has its own discussion and it's like not typically ongoing for terribly long, or like I don't feel obligated to like stay responsive on every comment section forever. But with like group chats and stuff, you have like that expectation that you're going to always be always up to date, reading all the messages and whatever. I totally agree. I'm not huge into that stuff. I don't like, I have a Discord community that I use for my Patreon, but it's like very small, and I'm very happy that it's such a small community because yeah, once they get bigger, it definitely becomes a headache. Yeah, I guess when I started out YouTube, my main goal was just to get invited on the Census Arizola podcast. So I didn't have huge desires to have build a community. Wasn't my intention. That wasn't the goal. The goal was just to talk about Godzilla and to hopefully have them notice me so that I could talk about Godzilla with them. Over the years, like the community really started to find my channel in 2016 when Shin Godzilla was getting popular. And like that's when my channel started to build its own community. And I guess I was never too off put about putting my opinion out there at first because I was so coming from such an outside perspective. Like I didn't watch a ton of Godzilla YouTube. The SOS talks about Godzilla, but they're not, well, they are all Godzilla fans. Like their channels, they weren't only talking about Godzilla. It was Godzilla fans talking about other things, which is what I really liked in the beginning as well. And like early into my channel, it was a Godzilla channel, but it wasn't, the videos I was uploading were not mostly about Godzilla. It was rare for me to upload a Godzilla video. And it was mostly just me talking about whatever I was interested in week to week, like whatever Marvel movie was coming up or whatever Walking Dead episode had just come out. But it slowly became more and more narrow over time. And as that happened, I started to get exposed to all the different sides of the fan base. And I feel like for a while there, I fell into like more of a drama side of the fan base. I'm glad I got out of that. And then I kind of became more comfortable doing my own thing, doing the news videos and really found my space. But I'll tell you, like really started late 2018, but got really bad in early 2019. The Godzilla versus Kong debate became really insufferable to be a part of. And so for a really long time, I became super bitter about posting anything because everything I was posting was being heavily criticized and everybody was coming after every little thing I said. You know, for a long time, here's a good example. Back in the day, I would criticize that I felt Godzilla was a little too weak in Godzilla 2014. You know, the building falls on top of him. He gets crushed by it. And I always felt like I've always interpreted that scene as being that nearly killed Godzilla. In fact, afterward, he's so injured by that and by the fight with the Mutos that he collapses in the streets for an entire day and he's out for the count for a while. And everybody was kind of on the same page up until you would use that example in relation to like maybe Kong could knock him out. And then people became hyper defensive over Godzilla. Oh, the building never affected him that much. You're downplaying his strength. And it became really like this. It was not fun to engage in the discussion. Like from my perspective, it was like, I'm talking about, you know, how these two monsters could match up in a fight. People are getting way too defensive about it. And now they're overblowing the feats of 2014 Godzilla or whatever. And it became like a really unfun place to have conversations for a while. So like in the Godzilla versus Kong era, I really withdrew from the community. I would post a video. I wouldn't read the comments. I wouldn't engage at all. And it would just be out there. And it was like, felt more like a job at that point. Like I was making videos because it was a job and because it was like my primary source of income. So I was going to put the video out and not engage with the community. And after GVK settled enough and after I was kind of getting into the back end of college where I could spend a little more time on YouTube again, that's when I really wanted to start engaging with the community again. And so like then I started to respond to comments, and in the -1 period I had a lot of fun engaging with the community, and I become a little less worried about what people are going to think about what I'm saying, mostly because that Godzilla versus Kong animosity kind of subsided after the movie came out. Like it's not as toxic of a situation to like get your opinion out there on something, especially something as trivial that doesn't really matter in the real world as Godzilla versus Kong. But now I'm at a point where like posting it, the community aspect is a huge part of why I post my videos, because I really enjoy interacting with my comment sections and talking to people in my comments. I've kind of pulled off of all of the other social medias. Like I really don't enjoy posting on Twitter because I feel like there's still a lot of that anger in the fan base on Twitter. And Instagram, I just didn't have the capacity to be posting on as many platforms anymore. So I kind of quit with Instagram as well. But I really enjoy engaging with my YouTube community. And so I would say like if you're kind of feeling like you don't know how to get your opinion out there, or if it's worth engaging with people, I would say it totally is, but you got to like know the limits, know the audience that you're building, and you can get a real nice established kind of relationship with that audience. And then you'll learn very quickly where people from the outside will come in and what they're going to take issue with. And really the YouTube game is just learning how to tune those voices out, learning how to really focus on your community and rather less what the people out of the community you've built have to say about you.
Yeah. As like a smaller what'd I do? Oh, my bad. As like a smaller creator, I think it's kind of hard to have like a big community of like the size that I have. I have like a little over like less than 600. I think I'm like 597. So how can you kind of find like how do you build a community? That's what I kind of want to know. So how can you like engage with the community?
Well, I think a lot of it really, as far as like building a community, like how many you said, 500, 600?
Almost 600 at this point.
That's a pretty huge community. I mean, if you think about that in terms of people in the real world, like that's more than a high school's worth of people. Well, maybe not. It depends on your school, I guess. I mean, and I'm talking graduating class. Like, I guess it depends on each school. Mine was actually pretty large, but I'd be willing to bet my graduating class was not more than 600 people. It's a lot of people, and it builds fast. Like the more people rack up, the harder it is to rationalize how many people it is in the real world, But I would say it was really just engaging with my comment section. Back in the day, I did have like a Facebook page that I would post on occasionally. I did post on Twitter. Instagram was a good way to kind of meet people, but it really was through the comment section that I got to know people. And I guess Instagram back in the day was kind of a secondary community where people typically was people like who found me on YouTube would then go find my Instagram. And I used to respond to a lot more DMs than I do now, which I guess did help like build smaller individual relationships. But in terms of like building a full community, it really was directly responding to comments, and not only responding to comments, but like I would get comments, especially back when I was starting out. I'd get like one comment and I'd make a whole video responding to that comment and that person, and like treating it more like an ongoing conversation with my viewership rather than putting a video out and then just letting it be, like what eventually I started to do with Godzilla versus Kong, just to kind of get away from the toxicity of that movie. When I started out, it really was just like responding to comments. I would be going all over like the Facebook pages, seeing what people on Facebook had to say, and then taking the conversation back to my channel and continuing it there. So like I would see posts about Shin Godzilla where people were discussing this aspect of his design or sharing these memes that they were posting about Shin Godzilla. And I would take those back to my channel and share them with my viewership. And a lot of the people would migrate with me from the Facebook pages. They would hear that I was talking about them, and then that's how they would like come to my channel and I'd get to know them. One of my like I would say closer relationships I've had over the years is with someone named Kaiju Tony, and that's exactly how I met him. He was posting memes about Shin Godzilla on Facebook, and I was talking about his memes in my videos. Somehow, some way, he found out, and then he started commenting on my videos, and like the conversation moved to where I was, and that's how I kind of built my community where I was. You know, like it was more curated that way, rather than trying to jump into someone else's conversation. I could create my own conversation over here, and if the people wanted to, they could come have it with me, and it just kind of built over time that way.
Yeah, I've kind of like a similar experience, like with Kyle over at Kaiju Canuck.
Mm-hmm.
I became a member of his channel. I found his channel. I'm like, oh, I like this guy, so I kept watching him, commented, and it eventually got me to have a live stream with him. It was very fun. We talked about Godzilla figures for like 2.5 hours.
Are you a big collector?
Yeah. So being a youth in the fandom, how has that kind of like shaped your relationship with being a Godzilla fan?
It's interesting. You know, I think it has helped me a lot, and it's also been long term, it's had an interesting effect. So it helped me a lot because when I was young, you know, when I was just starting out, I was so young that like sometimes people would reach out to me, I think, excited about how young I was and how passionate I was at that age, you know. And like, for instance, when I started working with Anime Matsuri, I'm pretty positive a big reason why they wanted to start working with me was because I was so young, and because they liked the fact that I was in the middle of being more like mature, but also being very fanboy about how I feel about everything.
Yeah.
And it's been like it was another thing that I think helped strengthen some of my friendships with many of the people I've met over the years, how young I was. At the same time, long term, it's been interesting because I've grown up with Godzilla so directly. It's really changed my relationship with the movies themselves. Like, it is so hard for me to just watch a Godzilla movie anymore, because like now anytime I'm watching it, I'm thinking about what videos could be made from it. I'm thinking about the lore. It's gotten really complicated with like my feelings on the MonsterVerse in particular, because I've spent so many years of my life covering the MonsterVerse. I think if you were to total up like the amount of content I've just put out on the MonsterVerse, finished content, we're talking like a year of my life worth of content alone, let alone the time that goes into making those videos, watching the movies, writing the scripts, finding the news sources, editing the videos. Because I do that all myself, I've spent more time with the MonsterVerse than any single director who has worked on a MonsterVerse movie has. By far, I've spent well more time on it. And because of that, I've got this really complicated relationship where I feel very loyal to some of the lore that has been completely ignored or moved away from. And because of that, it's really hard for me to accept a lot of the stuff they do today, because I've spent too much time with this universe. I've spent more time living in this universe than anyone else. And so it's really hard for me to accept a lot of the changes that get made and stuff. And it has, I think, weakened how much I can enjoy the movies as they continue to come out. And it's also to the point where it's like I don't have the ability to I used to have a much wider range, you know, like I didn't just watch Godzilla films. I'd watch all sorts of kaiju movies. And now if I'm going to watch a kaiju film, it's going to be a Godzilla movie, and it's going to be because I'm making a video on it. Like, I rarely watch a movie for fun. The first Godzilla movie I've watched for fun with no strings attached is Godzilla vs. Mothra 1992, which I watched the other night. And it was so refreshing to sit back and watch a Godzilla movie without feeling like I was obligated to do something with that viewing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that the amount of time I've spent with the movies has in many ways strengthened my fandom for the films, but also made it so that I'm really resistant to new ideas because they're coming out of nowhere for me. You know, like I've spent too much time getting used to the way things are and how they should be. And then someone who has not spent as much time in this universe steps in and tells a new story that does not fit the universe. And so it gets really tricky for me to accept a lot of those changes. and also it's just become more of like a thing where like the appreciation of Godzilla is now a job. It's like, as much as it is a hobby, it is a job for me now, where I will never get the purity back of just being a Godzilla fan with no strings attached. It will always have this immense amount of weight to it now that it didn't used to. So everything I take more seriously than I used to, and it gets a lot more difficult for me to keep engaging with like newer content, because I have way too high of expectations now, because I've spent too much time with the material. As far as like the way being a youth was impacted by being online, that's another situation where, like, in many regards, there was a lot of positives to being as young as I was starting out, because I was able to express feelings about the movies that I'll never get back, because I've aged out, or because, and especially once I've gone to school for filmmaking, I'll never be able to look at the movies as just purely stories anymore. There will always be movies, and I will always see the moving parts behind the scenes now, and I'll never get the purity back of being able to view them just as an experience. Like, the last time I think I will ever get that was probably technically Kong Skull Island. That was probably or maybe one of the anime movies, the anime trilogy. Maybe those were like the last times I was ever able to watch a Godzilla movie without the baggage of knowing more about how movies are made. Because once King of the Monsters started to come out, that's when I really started to get involved in the filmmaking side of things, and to start to learn about that. And so, like, the positive was that I got to express a side of myself that I'll never have again, like a very pure side that was untainted by too much knowledge or bitterness or whatever from years of exposure to the material. On the other hand, it was interesting because I was so young, I was first of all too influenced by other people. Like, it was really easy to lead me down the wrong path early on. I feel like I got very kind of edgy on the channel, and it was simply just because of the way other people were kind of aiming me in different directions. Like, I did fall into a more drama heavy side of the community early on, and that's purely because of how young I was and because of how influential other people were. And, you know, like, the drama kids, in this case, people who cause drama, presented themselves as like the cool kids. And you want to be one of the cool kids. But you, like, over the years, I look back and I cringe so hard at that time period, because they were not the cool kids. It was never cool to start drama or to be involved in drama. I'm sure Lewis could talk a lot about that too, because he was kind of involved in all that as well. It was this really kind of weird time where I think a lot of us were so young that I think we were all influenced by dumb things. Like, it was very popular. Drama YouTube was so popular back in 2016 that all of us were so young that we were all influenced by that. We all wanted to be cool like Drama YouTube, and we never were, because Drama YouTube was never cool. And also because of that, like, I think a lot of people will forever judge me on the grounds that, like, they remember me for being younger and more immature, and they remember me for having bigger blow-ups over things like Shin Godzilla shooting lasers out of his tail or evolving or whatever. Like, they remember me for having these insane freakouts over all that stuff. I guess I never really had the biggest freak out over that. I was just very vocal about the fact that I didn't like those ideas. But I think a lot of people seem to talk about me like I'm still that person, like 10 years ago me or 8 years ago me. That's one way that it will, like, forever be kind of awkward, that it will forever be this weight where people will always be able to judge me when I was a kid, and they'll always be able to judge me now using evidence from, like, when I was, 8 years ago. They'll always be able to look at how immature I portrayed myself in a video, or how silly my reaction was to this thing, or whatever. And it will always be this weird weight where people can always judge me when I was a kid forever. For the rest of time, they'll be able to judge me when I was a kid because I was so publicly online. It was also weird because you'd get exposed to so many different people, and when you're so young, it was really hard for me to understand like the boundaries on where I should place my trust in people. You know, like I remember specifically on Instagram, I felt like there was a very predatory like communities that used to exist on Instagram, particularly when I was a minor. Those people would message me, and it'd always be like, someone would message me. I would get excited because I loved to engage with my fans. So I would always respond to DMs at the time. And very quickly you'd learn that many people have ulterior motives. Some people are jerks. Some people are predators. And it was very odd. And it was an awkward thing to have to go through so frequently. And it was also especially weird that once I was no longer a minor, I no longer experienced much of that. And is it because they were straight up were predators and they knew I was underage and that was a thing? Or is it because once I got older, I started to get more wise about who I would respond to? So yeah, it definitely has both sides, you know, like it was exciting to be such a young face in the fandom. I think that gave me more opportunities than it gave a lot of other people on the grounds that I was so young and new in the fan base that I think sometimes companies found that to be very exciting. On the other side, it did expose me to a lot of really nastiness that you shouldn't have to be exposed to when you're so young. And like also people being so mean, like hate comments or on online forums. I know like to this day, people on Toho Kingdom forums tend to not like me very much. But when you're younger, you read those comments that are mean about you and they really stick with you. They stick with you for a long time. It's really hard to overlook how nasty people can be towards you. And what was always weird was like they would be judging like a video of mine, but they'd be judging it like it's my entire presence. Like that's all I am in the entire world is based on what their opinion of me was from that video. It's been interesting, you know, like I think for a while it did affect my self-esteem a lot where I felt really self-conscious about a lot of the mean comments I would get. And it was hard to deal with. Over time, I think I got a little better at it. But, you know, back in the day, I remember I used to argue with people like all day long in my comment section, trying to defend myself, you know, because I didn't have the head on my shoulders to know to just walk away and not engage with those people. It was really hard to overlook. And I think that was mostly because I was so young. And it was a lot harder for me to then view myself as myself without thinking of all the mean things people had said about me. So yeah, it definitely has there's definitely gives and takes to it. You know, I think I started making Godzilla YouTube videos when I was 12 or 13. And so like growing up in the fan base so publicly from that age, it was really strange. And I like a lot of my peers are people who are my friends, I should say, are people older than me. So they're not necessarily my peers on an age level. Like I'm friends with Kaiju Canuck, but he's a lot older than me and he will never have to go through that side of the community because he started when he was much older. And he'll never have people like judge teenager him the way that people will always be able to judge teenager me. Yeah, it's been very interesting. I wouldn't undo it because I'm very grateful for all the experiences and opportunities I've had, but it is definitely a big part of it. Definitely like being so young shaped a lot of the way I viewed myself. And even in some ways, like, you know, gaining a big popularity, like I remember I exploded in terms of channel growth in 2018. Like my channel had been steadily growing and I went from being like a guy who had not many friends at school. I had like a really close friend group, but it was small. My friend group got really big about the time I started YouTube. And then I went to high school. And by going to high school, like, I don't know if you had this experience, pretty much none of my friends went to the same high school as me. So it was like getting reset back to ground one. I basically carried over 2 or 3 close friends and lost all the other friends I had just made. And then I didn't want to make new friends because I wanted my old friends back. So I didn't really make new friends for the first 2 years of high school, which I very much regret. By my junior year, I started to make more friends and I started to get more popular. But then all of the sudden, off to the side, I have this explosion of popularity online. I grew from like 20,000 to 40,000 subscribers in a matter of months. And from there, my channel was just taking off, and it felt like I was going to skyrocket forever. And I think it majorly boosted my ego, both in terms of I boosted my own ego online to try and make up for the fact that there were so many people saying mean things about me, that I tried to make myself seem more invincible by portraying myself as somebody who had a bigger ego than I actually did. And it kind of took on a persona when I would make videos. And I stayed in a persona for many years while making videos, basically as a defense mechanism against people criticizing me. Because then they're not really criticizing me, they're criticizing the persona.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think it genuinely did boost my ego in my day-to-day life as well. Because if you portray yourself as somebody with a big ego all day, eventually it's going to rub off and you're going to start to take things away from that. And it gets very blurry. Where does the persona begin and end? I kind of like, I don't know when it was. I would say I lost that major ego I had built for myself for the most part, but never completely. But for the most part, I lost a lot of that ego at some point in college, and I'm very thankful for that. And I've definitely tried to stop portraying myself as somebody with a big ego, mostly because every time I do, it winds up getting somebody annoyed at me. And I'm tired of annoying people. I'm tired of people getting annoyed at me and then being like, oh yeah, I could see how I caused that. I would rather if somebody gets annoyed at me to be like, that's on them. They don't have to like me. Rather than being like, oh yeah, that one was my bad. I shouldn't have been so egotistical or arrogant about that topic. Even if I was doing it for comedy, not everybody's going to find that funny. So I think it's been very interesting to grow up with YouTube as such a major part of my life, because it really has had all sorts of pros and cons. Like on the one hand, it did give me a lot of self-confidence. On the other hand, maybe it gave me a little too much self-confidence. And at times it would tear my confidence completely away because of all the hate comments. And so it was a very interesting experience growing up over the years in the fan base in such a public way. And then it's also been interesting because like now it feels like a lot of that's been taken away. Like my channel's I have more subscribers now than I've ever had before, but my channel's nowhere near as popular as it used to be. And I'm not talked about as much. And so in a way it was like, when that happened, it became really hard to keep wanting to make videos. Like I understood why that happened. It was because I kind of stepped away for college and I'd post every once in a blue moon and I'd go months without posting. And when I came back, channels like Dangerville had essentially completely replaced the niche I had filled in the fan base. It became very, very difficult to deal with that and to like, do I want to continue? Is there even a point? But eventually it was like, yeah, I really like the community that I built. I really like, even if it is smaller now than it used to be, I really love engaging with my community, and I really missed it in college. And so finally being able to like post videos more often, it's been really rewarding to step back into it. But it's been a really interesting transition for like my mental health and my self-worth to deal with the fact that I don't think I'll ever be as popular as I was back in the day. And not only that, but I don't think like another part of it is I will always be able to look back at those videos and I can see the spark that I've told you already has been lost, because now I will always view the movies as movies, and I'll never get the purity back of being able to view it just as a story, untouched, continuity errors be damned, and just allow the story to take center stage. It's really hard for me to do that anymore. And so that also is a thing where I'll always look back and be like, I will always be chasing the purity that I used to have in terms of my love for this material. And I know I can never truly get it back, but I'll always be chasing those feelings again. And then to like have to question, is that maybe another reason why people over the years have gravitated away from my channel? You know, it's like someone like Dangerville, I think that they're getting a little more comfortable sharing their opinions on the movies and stuff. But like for a while, I felt like when you'd watch their videos, they'd just be kind of telling you exposition without telling you their opinion on the exposition. And I've always given my opinion. And my opinion over the years has gotten a lot more critical. And it's like, is a big reason that I'm maybe not as popular as I used to be because I'm more critical than I used to be. You know, so it is very interesting to like have to always be growing and reflecting, and to be able to do that so publicly is a very strange process.
Dangerville's. I don't know. Did you? I think you commented on my Dangerville video.
Yeah, I did.
I think they're getting better at not clickbaiting, but like, I don't know. I don't watch them as much as. I think like, I don't follow them on any social platforms except YouTube now. Because like sometimes, like occasionally, I'm like, oh, I'll watch this because I'm bored. But like, it's.
I filmed the response video to your video on Danger.
Oh, you did?
I never posted.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to upset people, you know, but I was just agreeing with you for the most part. Like, I was totally agreeing and sharing my own perspective on my experience over the years. But yeah, I never posted it because like I don't want to start drama. That's all right.
Because to be honest, I didn't experience that much. I got some of that. Like I had my own thoughts, but I got some information from MM, the Great Hunter from Kaiju Canuck's server, because I'm like, they were fine when I was watching them, but like over the years, I'm like, oh, I could start to see that, and so I started watching them less and less. I barely even watch them anymore, which is good.
I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not misremembering. If I am, my apologies, Dangerville. I'm pretty sure that they reached out to me back in the day because I had called out just a broad spectrum of YouTubers at the time who I felt were really clickbaiting Destroya being in Godzilla King of the Monsters, like putting confirmed in the title. Like I'll put confirmed in a title. Like I did a video not too long ago. I remember people being like, "Oh, you shouldn't have put confirmed in this title," where I was talking about the fact that we'll see more Toho Kaiju in the future of the Monsterverse. And the reason I put confirmed was because it was directly an interview from Adam Wingard where he was saying, if I return in the Monsterverse, I'm going to use more Toho Kaiju. If I don't return to direct the next Monsterverse movie, the next director is going to have their own list of Toho Kaiju they're going to want to use, and they're going to use them. And I feel like that's confirmation enough that, like, even if not in this next movie, we're going to keep getting Toho monsters eventually in the Monsterverse. But I called out the trend of like confirming Destroya and King of the Monsters. And 2 people messaged me. I'm so confident it was Dangerville. I know for a fact who the other YouTuber was, which I won't say, but I'm so confident Dangerville messaged me and was like, don't call us out like that. That's so mean. And I know I did have a conversation with Dangerville about Destroy and King of the Monsters where I was like, you can't clickbait that. And so they started to put, like, I don't know if you've noticed in all their titles, they have like lore or news or whatever in their title.
I've noticed that. And
they started doing that because of my video way back in the day when I called them out. And they, to be fair, like we had a conversation about it in the DMs and they responded and were like, oh, okay, we'll tell you when it's a theory. We won't just put the video out and let you figure it out. It's a theory after watching it. We'll let you know it's not news up front. And I appreciate that they've done that ever since. I'm very appreciative that even now, however many years later, 5 years later, they're still putting that in the title. But yes, I did very much agree with the video you made, and I had my own thoughts, but I felt like I didn't want to ruffle feathers by posting it.
I feel like I would have been brought into it as well. I would probably most likely if you did.
Get brought into the discussion?
Yeah.
Well, because the way I recorded that video, I actually never addressed them by name, but I did address you by name, saying I had seen your video. I said I saw a video you made, and I filmed the video the day I commented on your video. I said I saw a video you made, which by that point, I think it was a couple days or like maybe a week or so old or something. And I said when you posted the video, but I didn't say what video it was. And I didn't ever say who you were talking about, but I was just giving my perspective on this. This guy talked about another YouTuber in the community, and here's my thoughts on what they had to say. But I felt like I didn't want to put unnecessary attention on I didn't want to create drama. I didn't want to get in drama myself. I didn't want you to get in drama. I didn't want Dangerville to get in drama. And I knew that no matter how my intentions were when making that video, people were going to get defensive over somebody. And it was the comments at the very least were not going to respond well, because the video wasn't drama. I wasn't making a drama video. I was just simply giving my perspective on how I feel that YouTube has changed dramatically. And no matter how many times they change it to try and de-incentivize clickbait, it only gets worse. That was really the gist of what the video I was making was. But I knew people were going to misinterpret. And I didn't want that. I didn't want people to start drama with Dangerville thinking that they're defending me or whatever, when that was never the point of what I was going to have to say. But that's another thing you'll learn. Like, people will always misinterpret what you say no matter how clear you are. It's why I don't often discuss other YouTubers, because if I have a criticism, somebody's going to misinterpret it. And it could be a lighthearted criticism. It could be a very critical thing, like a fundamental thing that I think should change about the way this or that channel is run. But no matter how nice the intentions are, somebody's going to misinterpret it and start drama because of it. Like the best example I could point to recently is I made a video not terribly long ago discussing how I read a VFX interview for The New Empire that discussed the Titan Charybdis at the start of the movie. And I speculated that maybe Charybdis was supposed to be a different monster and they swapped it for Scylla later in. Well, then I got a comment from one of the visual effects supervisors on New Empire who said, no, Scylla in the movie is Charybdis. We made this line. You're right. And I tried to be very clear and be like, this is the comment I got from Spencer Cook. This is what Spencer Cook is saying. And people still found a way to misinterpret it, to where it became really volatile on like Reddit and Twitter, with people arguing back and forth either on my behalf or on Spencer Cook's behalf or on Drew Edward Johnson's behalf or whatever, or Greg Keys, I should say. Like all these people fighting with each other. And it's like, all of you guys have universally missed the point. There is no argument to be had. You're not defending me. You're making me look worse by making it seem like I'm arguing the point that you're arguing. And so I had to make a third video to try and clear up the topic and be like, there's no way you can misinterpret this video. But that's the thing you're going to learn is like, no matter how noble your intention or small is your intention, like sometimes I'll make a video and I'll make a point that I think is a really small point that I'm making, and then it'll get overblown. It happens all the time. It's just another little weird internet thing that you'll get used to, where it's like, yeah, people have a tendency to always take what you say and run with it to the point where it's no longer what you said. And at some point, you got to learn you can't correct everybody. You can't go around fighting all day long trying to prove that that's not what I meant. At some point, you just got to say your piece and just let it be.
I have to wrap this up. I have to run to work. One final thing. What would your advice be to like a new Godzilla fan? Like getting into it and then
just a brand new fan, or like somebody who wants to make videos? Like
someone who wants to make videos and who's brand new and like wants to interact with the community.
Just, I would say, take every opportunity you get in your comments to build a relationship with the people watching your videos. Comment and respond to the people commenting on your videos. If they respond, try and respond back. Have ongoing conversations with them, because the better you can get to know your viewers, the better you can build a community and curate your content around the type of things the people you're engaging with want to see. And like, don't try too hard to chase what other people are doing. Don't try too hard to follow the criticisms, you know. Be yourself. Post the videos you want to make. If you're not actually passionate about the topic, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it because of an obligation. Talk about it because you want to talk about it. And over time, people who want to talk about that topic will find your video. Hopefully the algorithm gets it out there. And if somebody does see your video, hopefully they'll comment. And if they do, try and take that as an opportunity to build a relationship with the people watching your videos. I feel like I am very familiar with most of the people who comment like within the first hour or so on my videos. I typically know all of them by profile pictures. I don't really know the names, to be honest. It's just too many names to memorize, but the profile pictures always stand out to me, especially the people that keep the same profile picture for many years. That's super helpful. Build your audience around what you want to talk about, not what other people want you to talk about. And the community that wants to hear about those topics will form. That's how Canuck did it. You know, he is very specifically like a figure channel who's kind of into the businessy side of figures. It's a pretty small niche, but he's managed to build a really strong community around that. It's super cool. You know, that's my best advice is like, if you're not feeling it, if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. It's just not worth it. And also, if you're starting out on YouTube, don't start out with the intentions of it being your job. Start out with the intentions of it being you expressing yourself. I was making videos not to be a job, but to express my thoughts. I did have the hope that I'd get invited on that podcast, but over time it became more and more clear I was never going to get invited on the Census Serizawa. And then it was more like I was making the videos sharing my opinions because they're my opinions. And I want to talk about this thing. I want to talk about Shin Godzilla's new design. I want to talk about the new theme song in Shin Godzilla. I want to talk about whatever. And people eventually formed a community around that. That's my best advice, is to do it your way. Do it your way, making the videos you want to make, not making the videos other people are trying to force you to make, or trying to curate yourself to be like, I'm going to be the next Dangerville. Don't ever try and be the next somebody. Just try and be you. That's the best advice I could give. And as long as you're doing that and you're staying true to yourself and the types of videos you want to make, I feel like, in my experience, if the passion is truly there, people will appreciate it. And that's the best part of it, is you can build a community passionate about the same thing as you, rather than trying to join someone else's community and trying to make them care about you in someone else's conversation. Have your own conversation, and people should notice.
I think I definitely struggle with getting conversations out there, to be honest. I'm very bad at explaining things.
It's a skill. Like, it's really hard. Like, I feel like I word vomit too much. I elaborate too much. But when I started out, man, I struggled to make videos. I didn't know what I was doing. I was very awkward. I wouldn't even talk that loud because, like, I was kind of like shy about getting my opinion out there, and like I would talk directly into the microphone because I didn't want to have to project. And you'll eventually, the more you get used to it, the more you'll be able to, project yourself and put on more of a display, and also you'll get a lot better at articulating your thoughts as you do it more. It's just one of those things. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a content creator who started out nailing the style that they eventually became popular for. They always are awkward. Everybody's awkward when they're starting out because no one's ever confident enough, and you have to learn what works and what doesn't along the way. And the only way you can do that is just by trying and trying and trying, and eventually it'll just kind of home itself in, and you'll lock on to what you want to do, and you'll find your style, and you'll get much better at articulating your thoughts. I'm still, to this day, I feel like I'm not great with figure reviews. I do them, and I feel like I've gotten a lot better at them, but it's still like something I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always learning more ways to do figure reviews and better ways to do figure reviews. And I have experimented with many different styles of figure reviews and whatever, but I feel like that's one of those, like, because it's not my primary source of content, I still struggle with that, where I'm like, is this good? Is this what I'm wanting to say about this figure? Does this video accomplish my goal? But the only way you can learn that is just by trying it.
Thank you. I'll leave a link to your YouTube channel in the description. Thank you so much for joining us.
Cool. Thank you so much, man.
I think we could all learn a lot from what D-Man and Donny said. I think it's very important to get all of this out there, because I feel like even new Godzilla fans can learn and kind of spot some of this and kind of prevent that. So just thank you. I don't know. like and subscribe, I guess. I want to give a big shout out to Donny and Demon1954 for being a part of this very, very long video. And if you guys want access to the fully unedited interviews, the link to all of the unlisted videos are in the description as well. Thank you. Like and subscribe, I guess. Bye.